Today, in modern society, with all of our technological and social advancements, with our education, have we finally eliminated the need for God? Are you at all concerned with what the confusion in this world today is doing to the culture of tomorrow? Utopianism, hedonism, secularism. How are we ever going to restore Catholic culture? Be sure to share your thoughts below. I read each and every comment. Welcome, I'm Brad Schepisi, and in last week's video, I spoke about two different extremes, the extreme of materialism and the extreme of fundamentalism. On the one hand, materialism rejects the idea that we have a spiritual soul, and therefore there are a number of consequences that naturally flow from that rejection. On the other hand, an extreme spiritualism or fundamentalism rejects the use of right reason, and therefore there are a number of superstitious consequences that naturally flow from that. In that video, I explained that both of these extremes, by virtue of their misunderstanding of human nature, have also been programmed to misunderstand, if not fully reject, the teaching of the incarnation of Christ, that God took on material flesh and a spiritual soul to become one of us. Now, the consequences of this misunderstanding or this rejection are much more devastating because they lead to a societal view that we have in fact eliminated a need for God. From the beginning in the garden, we see that it was God's providence to provide for all of our needs, both spiritual and physical. Now, this theme is carried out throughout salvation history. For example, in the desert, we see that God is providing for us with manna from heaven. Now, we see this again in our own time through the sacraments, that God in his providence is still providing for all of our needs, spiritual and physical. And he doesn't do this simply by just giving us simple food and water, but in a profound way, he gives us his very life, that to sustain our lives, he gives us his life, the very author of life. So a materialistic culture is going to reject the sacraments, not just because they reject the existence of the spiritual soul, but also because they reject the needs of a spiritual soul. So, unfortunately, their souls are left wanting. Now, on the other extreme, a fundamentalist culture is going to reject the sacraments for the exact opposite reason. Failure to understand our material natures, failure to understand the role that our material bodies have, that they have a penitential role in our sanctification. And when they do reject the source and summit of our physical and our spiritual nourishment, God's providence, then where are they being fed? Where do they receive their nourishment? Because in their starvation, they're inclined to accept anything, no matter how crazy it is. It is this answer that is the origin of all of the ideologies that would fall under utopianism, whether it's socialism or communism or consumerism. All of the isms that would fall under the umbrella of utopianism, they are all some natural response to this natural inclination we have to be fed physically and spiritually, primarily through God's providence, and most profoundly from the altar through the sacraments. Because each and every one of these isms is designed to replace God's providence in our lives, that we no longer need him to care for us. We no longer need him to provide for us, because we can feed ourselves, whether it's through the lips of a politician who's promising some social program that's going to eliminate hunger or poverty or whatever, or through the lips of a CEO that's going to launch a new product that's going to revolutionize our lifestyle. Humans have needs. We have physical needs, we have spiritual needs, and people who want to accumulate wealth and power, they know this, and they use this, and they make these promises. But since none of these people can actually give us what it is that we truly need, then all they can really offer us is the lowest common denominator, that being pleasure. So societies that become isms, that move into utopianism, end up ultimately becoming hedonistic. So there's this motion, this utopian motion away from the sacraments has a simultaneous motion into hedonism. And as long as our needs are met, as long as we're hungry, then who needs God? So looking at the culture that we have built here in the West, Monday through Friday, we spend all of our time sitting around the cable news channels watching talking heads argue about this social program versus that social program. Which social program is going to be better at filling all of our needs? Is the Republican way better or the Democrat way better? And then the next day, we just move our argument to Twitter, where we can practice the art of snarky arguing. We work Monday through Friday just to get to the weekend so that we can satiate whatever pleasure it is that we uniquely have, whether it's going out on Friday and doing whatever we do on a Friday night, or whether it's going shopping at a big box store or department store or Amazon or whatever on Saturday, or whether it's sitting in front of the TV on Sunday watching football. These have become our rituals. Every bit of this is oriented towards building a utopian society, and utopian societies do not need God. They do not need the sacraments, because utopian societies eliminate the need for God. This is why in our modern times, atheism has grown, while Mass attendance and belief in the Holy Eucharist have simultaneously declined, because physically and spiritually, we never hunger for God. A society that worships pleasure mocks at the idea of the Eucharist. If we are conditioned through the beauty of pleasure, whether that be a box of donuts or a really beautiful model on the cover of a magazine or something, if we are conditioned for that kind of beauty, then when the priest holds up what is truly beautiful, this small and simple host, and he says the most beautiful words that we could ever hear, "Behold the Lamb of God," then we, who are conditioned for flesh and for food, will be blind, and we will reject the flesh of God and the food of our souls. And there's been a lot of talk in the Catholic media in the last couple of weeks about this study that was just released, that 2/3 of Catholics do not accept the Church's teaching on the true presence of Jesus in the Blessed Sacrament.